August 6, 1945. 8:14 a.m. Hiroshima Red Cross Hospital. I'm wrapping a soldier's arm, shrapnel wound from an air raid last week, when the light comes. Not regular light. This is different. Brighter than 1,000 suns. Whiter than anything I've ever seen. It floods through the windows and turns everything into pure white nothing. Then the world explodes. If you want to know what it's like to survive an atomic bomb, to hate your enemies with every fiber of your being, and then watch one of them save a dying child, changing everything you thought you knew about war and humanity, hit that like button, subscribe, and comment below. Could you forgive the unforgivable? Let's find out together. My name is Yuki Tanaka. I am 27 years old. I am a nurse at Hiroshima Red Cross Hospital, or I was, before the light, before everything changed. August 5th, 1945. Evening journal entry. Another quiet day. Only 15 patients in the ward. The war feels distant here. Though we hear the B-29s pass overhead most nights heading to other cities. Why do they always skip Hiroshima? Some say we're being saved for something special. I pray they're wrong. I wrote that entry yesterday evening in my room at the nurses' dormitory, 24 hours ago. It feels like a lifetime. Let me tell you about the world before. Before the flash. Before the fire, before everything I knew turned to ash in an instant. August 1st, 1945, Hiroshima Red Cross Hospital. Hiroshima in the summer of 1945 was hot, oppressively hot, the kind of heat that sits on your chest and makes every breath feel like work. I'd been working at the Red Cross Hospital for 3 years, since graduating from nursing school in 1942. The hospital was a modern building by Japanese standards. 4 stories. Concrete and steel, built in 1939, just before the war really started consuming everything. It sat near the center of the city, less than 2 kilometers from the Aioi Bridge that marked Hiroshima's heart. We had 200 beds. Most were empty by August 1945. The war had moved on from Hiroshima. The fighting was in Okinawa, in the Pacific Islands, in the skies over Tokyo. Our city had been mostly spared the firebombing campaigns that destroyed so many others. Some people said it was because Hiroshima had too many military installations, that the Americans were saving it for something. Others said we were just lucky, that the B-29s had bigger targets. I wanted to believe in luck. That morning, August 1st, I was working in the surgical ward on the 3rd floor. We had 17 patients. Most were soldiers with minor injuries. A few civilians who'd been hurt in accidents. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that prepared me for what was coming. My supervisor was head nurse Saito, a stern woman in her 40s who'd been nursing since the Russo-Japanese War. She ran the ward like a military operation. Everything precise, timed, organized. Tanaka, she said that morning, clipboard in hand, checking the medication schedule. The soldier in bed 7 needs his dressing changed. Infection is clearing up nicely. Yes, Saito-san. The soldier, Private Hayashi, 19 years old, shrapnel in his shoulder from a training accident, smiled when I approached his bed. Good morning, Tanaka-san. How are you today? Better than you, I think, I said, unwrapping the old bandage. The wound looked good, clean, healing. You'll be back with your unit soon. His smile faded. I'm not sure I want to go back. Have you heard the news? The Americans took Okinawa. They're getting closer. People say they'll invade the home island soon. I didn't know what to say. We all knew the war was going badly. The radio broadcasts talked about strategic withdrawals and regrouping. But everyone understood what that meant. We were losing. Then we'll defend our homeland, I said, applying new bandage. The Emperor is counting on us. But even as I said it, I wondered, what would defending look like? Would Hiroshima become a battlefield? Would this hospital fill with wounded civilians, burning victims, dying children? I pushed the thoughts away, focused on the work. That's what nurses do. We focus on the patient in front of us, not the catastrophe we can't control. August 3rd, 1945, Hiroshima City Center. On my day off, I visited my parents in the Nobori-cho district, about 1 kilometer from the hospital. They lived in a traditional wooden house my grandfather had built in 1920. 2 rooms, paper walls, a small garden where my mother grew vegetables. My father was a clerk at the prefectural office. My mother had been a teacher before the war, but now spent her days in line for rations and tending the garden. My younger brother, Kenji, had been drafted into the Navy in 1943. We hadn't heard from him in 8 months. Still no word from Kenji? I asked my mother as she served tea. She shook her head. Nothing. I pray every day at the shrine. I tell myself no news is good news. But we both knew what no news usually meant. The military didn't send letters about soldiers who were alive and well. They sent letters about soldiers who died gloriously for the emperor. My father came home from work that evening looking exhausted. Older than his 52 years, the war had aged everyone. There's talk at the office, he said quietly. About the Americans. About invasion. Some officials are burning documents preparing to evacuate. Should we leave? My mother asked. Go to the countryside? Where? Everyone's leaving the cities. There's nowhere to go. He sipped his tea. Besides, Hiroshima hasn't been bombed. Maybe we're safe here. Safe. That word haunted me as I walked back to the hospital dormitory that night. The city looked peaceful in the summer twilight. Children playing in the streets. Women hanging laundry. Men walking home from work. Normal life. Continuing despite everything. But I'd seen enough wounded soldiers to know normal could end in an instant. August 5th, 1945. Evening. Nurses' dormitory. The dormitory was a 3-story building adjacent to the hospital. 26 nurses lived there. We were like sisters, eating together, gossiping, supporting each other through the difficult cases and long shifts. That evening, we gathered in the common room after dinner. Someone had a radio. We listened to the news broadcast, the usual propaganda about glorious victories and American defeats that nobody believed anymore. Do you think we'll surrender? Asked Nurse Kobayashi, a year younger than me. Like Germany did? Never, said Nurse Yamamoto, older and more traditional. Japan doesn't surrender. We'll fight to the last person if necessary. But what if the last person is us? Kobayashi persisted. What if they bomb Hiroshima like they bombed Tokyo? What if... Enough, said head nurse Saito, entering the room. This kind of talk helps no one. We are nurses. Our duty is to our patients, not to politics or strategy. When the wounded come, if they come, we will treat them. That is all. But later, alone in my room, I wondered, what if the wounded came and there were too many? What if the hospital itself was destroyed? What if we couldn't help anyone? I wrote in my journal that night, another quiet day. Only 15 patients in the ward. The war feels distant here. I was so wrong. August 6th, 1945, 7:30 a.m. I woke early as always, washed my face in the communal bathroom, put on my white nurse's uniform, pressed and starched, the way Saito-san insisted, pinned my hair back, checked my reflection in the mirror. A normal morning. A routine morning. The last normal morning of my life. I walked to the hospital with Nurse Kobayashi. The weather was beautiful. Clear sky, light breeze, the heat not yet oppressive. August in Hiroshima could be unbearable by midday, but the mornings were still pleasant. I'm thinking of visiting my grandmother this weekend, Kobayashi said as we walked. She's in the countryside, near Kure. She keeps asking me to come, says it's safer there. Maybe you should go, I replied. Take a few days. You haven't had leave in months. What about you? When did you last take time off? I was with my parents on Friday. That's enough. We entered the hospital through the staff entrance. The morning shift was starting. Nurses and doctors arriving. Night shift heading home. Patients waking. The normal rhythm of hospital life. I went to the 3rd floor surgical ward. Checked the patient roster. 17 patients. Same as yesterday. Private Hayashi's wound was healing well. Mrs. Nakamura had pneumonia but was responding to treatment. Everything routine. At 8:10 a.m. I heard the air raid sirens. This wasn't unusual. Sirens went off regularly when reconnaissance planes passed overhead. B-29s flew over Hiroshima almost daily, taking photographs, mapping the city, but never bombing. We'd stopped taking the sirens seriously weeks ago. Head nurse Saito barely looked up from her paperwork. Probably another reconnaissance flight. Continue with morning rounds. At 8:12 a.m., the all clear sounded. 2 minutes. False alarm, as usual. I was in the supply room getting fresh bandages when I heard it. A strange sound. High-pitched. like wind whistling, but wrong somehow. Getting louder, and then, at exactly 8:15 a.m., the sun fell on Hiroshima, August 6, 1945, 8:15 a.m. The flash. The light came first. Not through the windows, through everything, through the walls, through my closed eyes, through my skull and into my brain. White. Blinding. Absolute. I didn't see the flash. I was the flash. We all were. For one eternal instant, everything in Hiroshima became pure white light. Then the heat. A wall of heat like standing in front of an open furnace, except this furnace was the size of the city. My skin burned. My lungs burned. The air itself was on fire. I fell, or was thrown. I don't remember. One moment I was standing in the supply room. The next I was on the floor, bandages scattered around me, ears ringing, unable to see, unable to breathe, unable to understand what had happened. The building shook. Walls cracked. Glass exploded. Ceiling tiles fell. Somewhere people were screaming, but I couldn't hear them properly. Everything was muffled, distant, like I was underwater. I tried to stand, fell, tried again. My legs wouldn't work properly. My hands found the door frame. I pulled myself up. The surgical ward was chaos. The windows had blown inward. Glass everywhere, curtains on fire. The entire west wall was gone. Just gone. Open to the sky. And through that opening I could see the city. Hiroshima was burning. Not normal fire. Everything was on fire. Buildings, streets, trees. The air itself seemed to be burning. A massive column of smoke rose into the sky, black and red and wrong. It twisted up and up, spreading at the top like a mushroom, blocking out the sun. Patients were screaming. Some were bleeding from glass wounds. Others were trying to get out of their beds, panicking, not understanding. Private Hayashi was on the floor, his bed overturned. Mrs. Nakamura's pneumonia seemed minor now compared to the wooden beam that had crushed her chest. "Everyone out!" Head nurse Saito was shouting, blood running down her face from a head wound. "The building is unstable. Get the patients to the ground floor." But how? Half the patients couldn't walk. Some were unconscious. And the stairs, were the stairs even intact? I grabbed Private Hayashi's arm. "Can you walk?" He nodded, dazed. I helped him up. Nurse Kobayashi was helping another patient. Nurse Yamamoto was trying to free Mrs. Nakamura from under the beam. "Leave her," Saito shouted. "She's already dead. Save the ones you can." But Yamamoto wouldn't leave. She kept pulling at the beam, crying, trying to lift it. Another nurse, I don't remember who, finally dragged her away. We got 7 patients down the stairs. 3 floors, with walls cracking and fires starting and the whole building groaning like a dying animal. The stairwell was full of smoke. People were pushing, shoving, falling. Someone fell in front of me. I helped them up. Kept moving. Had to keep moving. When we reached the ground floor, I understood for the first time what had happened. The hospital lobby, which had been clean and orderly 30 minutes ago, was full of people. Hundreds of people. Thousands, maybe. They were streaming in through the destroyed entrance. Walking, crawling, being carried. And they were burned. Not normal burns. These people looked like they'd been melted. Their skin was hanging off in sheets. Their faces were unrecognizable masses of charred flesh. Their clothes had fused to their bodies. Some were naked. Their clothes burned away completely. Others wore nothing but patterns. Where their clothes had been printed, the pattern was burned into their skin. A woman stumbled past me. Her arms were raised in front of her, skin dangling from her hands like gloves being removed. She was moaning something. I couldn't understand the words. Her lips were burned away. A child, maybe 5 years old, sat against the wall. Half of his face was normal. The other half was charcoal. He wasn't crying. Just sitting there, staring at nothing. An old man crawled through the entrance on his hands and knees, leaving a trail of blood and burned skin. His back was a mass of blisters the size of my fist. "Help them!" Saito was shouting. "Anyone who can stand, help them! Get supplies from the pharmacy! Set up triage in the courtyard!" But there weren't enough of us. There weren't enough supplies. There weren't enough bandages in the world to cover these burns. There weren't enough beds. There wasn't enough medicine. There wasn't enough anything. I grabbed a bottle of burn ointment from the pharmacy. It was a drop in the ocean. I applied it to a woman's arms. She screamed. I moved to the next person. A man with his chest burned black. I didn't know what to do. The training hadn't covered this. Nothing had covered this. Water. People were moaning. Water, please, water. I gave them water. I wasn't supposed to. Burn victims shouldn't drink too much water. It can cause complications. But what did it matter? These people were dying. Everyone was dying. The least I could do was give them water. A mother came in carrying a child. The child was dead. I could see that immediately. Burned beyond survival. But the mother was still carrying her, still talking to her, still pretending she was alive. Please help my daughter, she said to me. She's hurt. Please help her. I couldn't look at the child. I looked at the mother instead. She had burns on her arms and face, but she was functional. She could be treated. Let me help you first, I said gently. No, my daughter, help my daughter. I will. But first let me look at your wounds. She finally set the child down. I cleaned and bandaged her arms, working mechanically, trying not to think about the dead child at my feet, or the thousands of other dead and dying people flooding into the hospital. More people kept coming. By 9 a.m., the courtyard was full. By 10 a.m., people were lying in the streets. By noon, we'd run out of bandages, ointment, painkillers, everything. We had nothing left but water and words. And still, they came. August 6th, 1945. Afternoon. By early afternoon, I understood this wasn't just a big bomb. This was something else, something new. Something that had destroyed the entire city in one instant. I'd seen bombing before. I'd treated victims from the air raids on other cities, but those were conventional bombs. They destroyed buildings, they killed people, but they were comprehensible. This was incomprehensible. The burns were strange. People who'd been indoors when the flash came had burns on one side of their body, the side facing the windows. People who'd been wearing white were less burned than people wearing dark colors. People who'd been in shadows were less injured than people in open spaces. And then there were the people who looked fine at first, who seemed uninjured, who helped carry others to the hospital. And then, hours later, they'd start vomiting, bleeding from their gums, losing their hair, dying from something invisible. What is this? Nurse Kobayashi asked me around 2 p.m. We were standing in the courtyard, surrounded by dying people, trying to take a 5-minute break. What kind of bomb does this? I don't know. They're saying, I heard someone say the whole city is gone. That the Americans dropped a special bomb, a new weapon. That's impossible. One bomb can't destroy a whole city, but we could see the city from the hospital courtyard. And it was gone. Just gone. Flattened and burning. The buildings we'd seen that morning, the shops, the houses, the schools, the temples, all gone, replaced by fire and rubble and smoke. The Aioi Bridge, the T-shaped bridge at the city center. I could just make it out through the smoke, still standing, somehow, but everything around it was destroyed. My parents, I whispered. They lived near the center, less than a kilometer from the hospital. If the whole city was destroyed, I tried not to think about it, tried to focus on the work, on the patient in front of me, on the next bandage, the next cup of water, the next dying person I couldn't save, but I kept seeing my mother's face, my father's smile, our wooden house with its small garden. Were they dead? Were they burned like these people? Were they crawling through the streets looking for help that wouldn't come? I have to go, I said to Kobayashi. I have to find my parents. You can't leave. Look around. These people need us. My parents need me. Head nurse Saito appeared beside us. Her head was bandaged now, but she was still working, still organizing, still trying to impose order on chaos. No one leaves, she said firmly. We stay here. We help who we can. That's our duty. But my family? Everyone has family. Everyone is worried. But if we all go looking, who helps these people? She gestured to the courtyard full of dying patients. We are nurses. This is what we do. She was right. I knew she was right, but it didn't make it easier. I went back to work. August 6th, 1945. Evening. As the sun set, the fires burning across Hiroshima created a hellish glow. The sky was red and black. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning. Wood, plastic, and flesh. We'd lost count of how many people we'd treated. Thousands. Tens of thousands, maybe. Most we couldn't really help. We gave them water, made them comfortable, held their hands while they died. The hospital had no electricity, no running water after the first few hours. We worked by candlelight and firelight, with torn sheets for bandages and nothing for pain except compassion. Around 8 p.m., a man stumbled into the courtyard. He was burned, like everyone else, but still mobile. He was calling a name. Michiko, Michiko. Nurse Kobayashi approached him. Sir, are you looking for someone? My wife. Michiko. She was at the market this morning. Have you seen her? Kobayashi looked around the courtyard. Hundreds of burned people. How could anyone identify anyone? What does she look like? Kobayashi asked gently. The man started describing her, but the description could fit dozens of women we'd seen. Burns erase identity. They turn people into anonymous victims. I haven't seen her, Kobayashi said finally. But many people have gone to other hospitals, other aid stations. She might be there. The man nodded, not believing it. He knew. We all knew. If she'd been at the market near the city center when the bomb fell. She was dead. He wandered off, still calling her name. I watched him go and thought about my parents again. Were they looking for me? Did they think I was dead? Was I looking at my own future, wandering through ruins, calling for people who'd never answer? Tanaka. I turned. It was Dr. Sasaki, one of the few doctors who'd survived the blast. He was young, only 30, but he'd aged a decade today. His white coat was covered in blood and black soot. We need to talk about tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow? These people. The ones who seem okay now but are getting sick. I think it's radiation. What's radiation? I don't know exactly, but I've read about it. If this was an atomic bomb, like the Americans were supposedly developing, it would release radiation, invisible energy that poisons the body. These people are dying from it. I looked at the patients lying in the courtyard. Some of them did look okay at first glance. No visible burns. But they were vomiting, bleeding, their hair falling out in clumps. Can we treat it? Dr. Sasaki shook his head. I don't think so. I don't think anyone knows how. We just have to make them comfortable. Make them comfortable. That's all we could do. That's all anyone could do. How many died today? I asked. I don't know. Thousands. Tens of thousands. The whole city. He trailed off, looking at the red sky. I don't think there is a city anymore. August 7th, 1945. Dawn. I didn't sleep. I don't think anyone slept. We worked through the night, moving between patients, giving water, holding hands, closing eyes. By dawn, the courtyard was full of corpses. We had nowhere to put them, no way to identify them, no way to notify families. We just covered them with sheets and moved them to one side, making room for the living. More people kept coming. Some from the city, others from the countryside, searching for family members. They'd walk through the courtyard, looking at faces, trying to recognize someone under the burns and swelling. Most went away crying. At dawn, I made a decision. I had to know. I had to find out about my parents. I'm going to look for them, I told Nurse Kobayashi. Just for a few hours. I'll come back. She nodded. Be careful. I walked into the destroyed city. The streets were full of rubble. Bodies lay everywhere, under collapsed buildings, in the streets, floating in the rivers. The smell was overwhelming, sweet and rotten and chemical all at once. Everything was gone. The buildings I'd known my entire life, the shops where I'd bought groceries, the temple where I'd prayed as a child, the school I'd attended. All gone. Just foundations and ash. I walked toward my parents' neighborhood, or where I thought it had been. The streets were unrecognizable. All the landmarks were gone. I found their house, or what was left of it, a pile of charred wood. The garden was burned. The gate was knocked down. I called their names. No answer. I searched through the rubble. Found a broken teacup, my mother's hairpin, my father's glasses cracked and bent. No bodies. Maybe they'd escaped. Maybe they'd gone to another hospital. Maybe I was lying to myself. I knew that. If they'd been home when the bomb fell, they were dead. Vaporized, maybe. Or crushed. Or burned beyond recognition. I sat in the ruins of their house and cried. Finally, I let myself cry. For my parents. For my maybe-dead brother. For the city. For the thousands of dead. For the world that had ended yesterday morning at 8:15 a.m. August 7th, 1945. Returned to hospital. I walked back to the hospital through the destroyed city. Survivors were emerging from the rubble. People who'd been trapped. People who'd hidden in cellars. People who'd somehow survived against all odds. They all looked the same. Burned. Shocked. Walking like ghosts through hell. Near the hospital, I saw a group of children. Orphans, probably. Their parents dead or lost. They were huddled together, the older ones protecting the younger ones. One girl, maybe 10 years old, was trying to comfort a crying toddler. I stopped. Looked at them. These children had lost everything. Their families. Their homes. Their futures. And who had done this to them? The Americans. The enemy. The people we'd been taught to hate and fear. In that moment, standing in the ruins of Hiroshima, looking at those orphaned children, I felt something I'd never felt before. Not fear, not sadness, but pure, absolute hatred. The Americans had done this. They'd dropped a bomb that destroyed an entire city, killed tens of thousands of civilians, children, babies, old people, people who'd never held a gun or hurt anyone. They'd turned my beautiful city into hell. They'd killed my parents. And someday, I promised myself this, someday I would see an American face to face, and I would spit on them. I would scream at them. I would make them understand what they'd done. I would make them pay for Hiroshima. I didn't know then that I would see an American much sooner than I thought, and that when I did, everything I believed about hatred and revenge and justice would shatter just as completely as my city had. But that moment was still weeks away. For now, I walked back to the hospital, back to the dying, back to the work that never ended, back to hell. August 8th, 1945. The aftermath. The next week was a blur of death and dying. More victims kept arriving. The ones who'd seemed okay at first started getting worse. Radiation sickness, Dr. Sasaki called it. Vomiting, diarrhea, bleeding, hair loss, and then death. Nothing we did helped. We had no treatment, no medicine, no hope to offer. We just watched them die. On August 9th, word came that another bomb had been dropped. On Nagasaki, another city destroyed in an instant. More tens of thousands dead. The war had to end soon. It had to. These bombs would kill everyone. Erase Japan from the map. Leave nothing but radioactive ruins. On August 15th, the Emperor spoke on the radio. His first public address ever. Most people had never heard his voice. We gathered around a crackling radio in the hospital lobby. Nurses, doctors, patients who could stand. The Emperor's voice was thin, formal. He used archaic language that was hard to understand. But the message was clear. Japan had surrendered. The war was over. Some people cried. Some were relieved. Some were angry. How could we surrender? How could the Emperor, the living God, admit defeat? I felt nothing. Just emptiness. The war was over, but what did that mean? My parents were still dead. The city was still destroyed. Tens of thousands were still dying from radiation. Victory or defeat? What difference did it make to the dead? What happens now? Nurse Kobayashi asked me. I don't know. Will the Americans come here? Probably. This is their victory. They'll want to see what their bomb did. Will they kill us? I thought about the hatred I'd felt when I saw those orphaned children. The hatred I still felt. The promise I'd made to myself. I don't know, I said. But if they try, I'll fight them. I meant it. In that moment, I truly meant it. I would fight the Americans with my bare hands if necessary. I would make them pay. I didn't know that everything was about to change. I didn't know that in 3 weeks, I would see something that would break my hatred like glass. I didn't know that the enemy would become human. August 30th, 1945. The Americans arrive. They came in trucks. Big green trucks with white stars painted on the sides. American military vehicles. Occupation forces. We'd been expecting them. But seeing them was different. These were the people who'd done this, who'd dropped the bomb, who'd killed my parents and destroyed my city. I watched from the hospital entrance as the truck stopped in the street. Soldiers climbed out, tall, well-fed, in clean uniforms. They looked like they were from another planet, another world where people still had enough to eat, and clothes without holes. An officer approached the hospital. He had a Japanese translator with him. A Nisei, probably. Japanese-American. "I'm Lieutenant Morrison," he said through the translator. "We're here to provide medical assistance and begin reconstruction efforts." Medical assistance. From the people who'd caused all the injuries. Dr. Sasaki met them at the entrance. "We don't need your help. I understand you're angry. But many people are still dying. We have supplies. Medicine. Doctors who specialize in radiation treatment." "Radiation treatment?" Dr. Sasaki's voice was bitter. "You mean treatment for the disease your bomb caused?" Morrison looked uncomfortable. "Yes, we want to help. You want to study us, like laboratory animals. See what your weapon did." The American didn't deny it. At least he was honest. "Both," he said finally. "Yes, we want to study the effects, but we also want to help the survivors. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive." Dr. Sasaki stood silent for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. "Fine. Help. But stay out of my way." The Americans brought supplies, bandages, medicine, food. They set up a field hospital in the courtyard, brought in generators for electricity, water purification equipment, and they brought doctors, American doctors who examined the radiation victims, took notes, tried treatments. I hated them. Every single one of them. I hated their clean uniforms and their well-fed faces and their trucks full of supplies that came too late for my parents. I refused to work with them. Other nurses did. Kobayashi helped translate, taught them about our patients, but I wouldn't. Couldn't. Every time I saw an American face, I saw the flash, the fire, the dead children. "You need to let it go," Kobayashi told me one day. "The hatred. It's poisoning you. They killed my parents. They destroyed our city. I'll never forgive them. Then you'll die angry. Is that what you want?" I didn't answer. Because yes, maybe I did want to die angry. Maybe anger was all I had left. But then, on September 12th, everything changed. September 12th, 1945. The child. I was in the courtyard organizing supplies when I heard crying. Not unusual, there was always crying. But this was a child. A young child. The sound cut through everything else. I followed the sound to the edge of the courtyard. There, in the ruins of a collapsed building across the street, a little girl was trapped, maybe 4 years old, pinned under a wooden beam, crying for her mother. I ran over. The beam was heavy. I couldn't lift it alone. I looked around for help. Other nurses were too far away. Patients couldn't help. And then I saw him. An American soldier. Young. Maybe 22. He'd been helping unload supplies from a truck. I hated him on sight. Hated his uniform. Hated his face. Hated everything he represented. But the child was trapped. And he was strong. Stronger than me. I swallowed my pride. My hatred. "Help," I said in broken English. One of the few English words I knew. "Child. Trapped." He understood immediately. Ran over. Together we grabbed the beam. Lifted. The girl was free. I pulled her out. She was injured, cuts and bruises, but alive. She clung to me, sobbing. The American soldier knelt beside us. He was smiling. Gently, carefully, he checked the girl for injuries. His hands were surprisingly gentle for someone who represented such destruction. He pulled a chocolate bar from his pocket, broke off a piece, offered it to the girl. She stopped crying, stared at the chocolate. She'd probably never seen chocolate before. Then she took it, ate it, and smiled. The soldier smiled back, said something in English. Then he stood up, nodded to me, and went back to his truck. I stood there holding the child, watching him go, and something inside me cracked. This man, this enemy, had just helped save a Japanese child. He'd been gentle, kind, human. He hadn't had to help. He could have walked away. Let the child die. It wasn't his country. Wasn't his problem, but he'd helped anyway. I carried the girl back to the hospital. Found her family. Her grandmother had been looking for her frantically. They were reunited. The grandmother thanked me over and over. I said nothing, just went back to work, but I couldn't stop thinking about that American soldier, about his gentle hands, about the chocolate he'd given to an enemy child, about the fact that he'd been human. That night, I went to the hospital chapel, a small room that had somehow survived the blast. I knelt before the altar and tried to pray, but I couldn't find the words. All I could think was, everything I believed was wrong. The Americans weren't monsters. They were people. People who'd done a monstrous thing, yes, but still people. People who could be kind to children. People who could help rebuild what they'd destroyed. People who, maybe, could be forgiven. I cried then. Really cried. Not for my parents this time, but for my hatred. For the weeks I'd spent consumed by anger and revenge fantasies. For the realization that hatred was easier than forgiveness, but forgiveness might be the only way to survive. I didn't forgive the Americans that night. Not yet. The wound was too fresh. The city was still in ruins. My parents were still dead. But for the first time since August 6th, I thought, maybe someday I could forgive. Maybe someday I could help build something new from these ashes. Maybe that would honor my parents more than hatred ever could. September 15th, 1945. Hiroshima Red Cross Hospital. 3 days after I watched an American soldier save a Japanese child, Dr. Sasaki called me into his office. The office was barely functional. One wall was still scorched from the blast, the windows covered with salvaged plywood. But it was private. That's what mattered. Tanaka, he said, looking exhausted. He'd aged years in the past month. We all had. The Americans want to establish a joint treatment ward, Japanese and American medical staff working together to treat radiation victims. I said nothing. They need Japanese nurses who can communicate with the patients, who understand our culture, our language. He paused. I'm assigning you to the joint ward. No, this isn't a request. I won't work with them. I can't. Dr. Sasaki's expression softened. I know what you're feeling. I feel it too. My wife died in the blast. My daughter. My parents. Everyone. But these patients need us. And the Americans have treatments we don't. Knowledge we don't. If we want to save lives, we have to work together. They caused this. They don't get to be heroes now. No one is asking them to be heroes. I'm asking you to be a nurse. To put your patients first. Can you do that? I wanted to say no. Wanted to walk out. But I looked at Dr. Sasaki's face. The grief. The exhaustion. The determination to keep going. And I understood. He was right. The patients came first. That's what being a nurse meant. Fine, I said. But I don't have to like it. I'm not asking you to like it. I'm asking you to do your job. September 16th, 1945. Joint treatment ward. The joint ward was set up in a cleared section of the hospital's first floor. The Americans had brought equipment, X-ray machines, blood testing equipment, medicines we'd never seen before. They'd even installed electric lighting powered by their generators. It looked like a hospital from the future compared to the rest of our ruined facility. I arrived for my first shift at 0700 hours. The American medical staff was already there. 3 doctors and 4 nurses, all in clean uniforms, all looking well-fed and rested while we Japanese staff looked like scarecrows in patched clothing. The lead American doctor was Captain Thompson, a tall man in his 40s with graying hair and kind eyes. He spoke through a Nisei translator named Sergeant Takahashi. Good morning, Nurse Tanaka, Thompson said via Takahashi. Thank you for joining us. I know this must be difficult. I said nothing. Just nodded stiffly. We're going to focus on radiation sickness patients today. We've developed some experimental treatments that show promise. White blood cell counts, infection management, nutrition therapy. Experimental treatments. They were using us as test subjects after all. But Thompson seemed to read my expression. I know what you're thinking. Yes, we're learning as we go. But everything we learn here helps the next patient. Helps future patients. This is new science. New medicine. We're all figuring it out together. He introduced me to the American nurses. Lieutenant Wilson, a blonde woman from Iowa. Lieutenant Chen, a Chinese American from San Francisco. Lieutenant Rodriguez from Texas. And Lieutenant Brown from Georgia. They all smiled. Tried to be friendly. I remained cold. Professional, but distant. We started rounds at 800 hours. The first patient was a 15-year-old boy named Hiroshi. He'd been at school when the bomb fell, about 2 kilometers from the hypocenter. He'd survived the initial blast, but had developed radiation sickness, vomiting, hair loss, bleeding gums. Captain Thompson examined him carefully, dictating notes to Sergeant Takahashi. Then he ordered a blood test and started an IV with vitamins and antibiotics. The infection is what will kill him if we don't intervene, Thompson explained. Radiation destroys white blood cells. That leaves the body defenseless against bacteria. We need to support his immune system artificially. It made sense. More sense than anything we'd been doing, which was basically making patients comfortable while they died. Over the next hour, I watched the American doctors work. They were thorough, methodical. They treated each patient with respect, explaining procedures, asking permission, being gentle. Lieutenant Wilson, the Iowa nurse, worked beside me with a young girl who had severe burns. Wilson's hands were steady, her voice soothing. She sang softly while changing bandages. An American song I didn't recognize. The girl stopped crying. Music helps, Wilson said through the translator. Distracts from the pain. I filed that information away, started humming a Japanese lullaby when I changed the next patient's bandages. It worked. The patient relaxed. Maybe the Americans did have things to teach us. September 20th, 1945. Late night shift. 4 days into working the joint ward, I was assigned to night shift with Lieutenant Wilson. Just the 2 of us, monitoring 20 patients through the night. We worked in silence at first, but around midnight, Wilson tried to start a conversation through our limited shared vocabulary and hand gestures. "You, family?" she asked in broken Japanese, pointing at me. I hesitated. Then, "Dead. Mother. Father. Brother may be dead. Navy." Her face fell. "I'm sorry. Very sorry." "Bomb," I said flatly. "American bomb." She flinched. "Yes, I know. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back." We lapsed into silence again. But 30 minutes later, one of the patients, an elderly man with radiation sickness, began having seizures. Wilson and I moved together automatically. She held his head, protecting it from injury. I administered the anti-seizure medication Dr. Sasaki had prescribed. We worked in perfect synchronization, like we'd been partners for years instead of days. The seizure passed. The man slipped into unconscious sleep. We covered him with a blanket and stepped back. "Good work," Wilson said in English. Then, haltingly in Japanese, "Good team?" I nodded. "Yes, good team." It was the first civil thing I'd said to her. She smiled. Then she pulled something from her pocket. A photograph. She showed it to me. A family portrait. A man in Navy uniform, 2 young children, and Wilson herself. "Husband," she said, pointing to the man. "Tom. He died. Pacific. Japanese. Killed him." I stared at the photo. Her husband had died fighting Japan. Probably killed by soldiers like my brother. And yet here she was, in Hiroshima, treating Japanese patients, saving Japanese lives. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "Me too," she replied. "War is bad. Everyone loses." She put the photo away. We continued working in silence, but it was different now. Not hostile, just sad. 2 women who'd lost people they loved. 2 women trying to save who they could from the wreckage. October West 1945. Breakthrough. 2 weeks into the joint ward, we had our first real success. A young mother named Keiko who'd been dying from radiation sickness, infected wounds, failing white blood cell count, bleeding internally, started improving after 5 days of the American treatments. Her fever broke. Her blood count stabilized. Her wounds started healing. Dr. Sasaki was stunned. This works. Their treatment actually works. Captain Thompson was more cautious. Sometimes, not always. We're still losing more than we're saving. But yes, this is progress. Keiko's family came to visit her that afternoon. Her husband and 2 children. They'd all survived because they'd been in the countryside. They cried when they saw her sitting up, smiling, looking almost normal. Her husband bowed deeply to Captain Thompson, to Lieutenant Wilson, to me. Thank you. Thank you for saving my wife. Thompson looked uncomfortable with the gratitude. We're just doing our job. But I understood why the husband was so grateful. In a city where everyone had lost someone, getting one person back felt like a miracle. A small victory against the death that surrounded us. That evening, I found myself actually talking to Lieutenant Wilson. Real conversation, not just medical necessity. Why did you come here? I asked through Takahashi, who was translating during his break. To Hiroshima. After what happened to your husband. Wilson was quiet for a moment. Then, because someone has to stop the cycle. Japanese killed my husband. Americans killed your parents. If we keep hating, keep killing, it never ends. Someone has to say, enough. Someone has to start healing instead of hurting. You don't hate us? For your husband? I hate what happened. I hate the war. But you? She gestured around the ward. These patients? These children? No, they didn't kill Tom. War killed Tom. And war killed your parents. We're all victims of the same disease. I thought about that for a long time. October 10th, 1945. The orphanage. The Americans established an orphanage in a partially intact school building. Hundreds of children had lost their parents in the blast. Some were true orphans. Others were separated and searching. The orphanage became a gathering point. Captain Thompson asked for volunteers to staff the orphanage clinic, basic medical care for the children. I volunteered. The orphanage was chaos. Children of all ages, crying, scared, traumatized. Some had burns, others had radiation sickness. All had lost everything. The American soldier I'd seen save that child in September was there. I learned his name, Corporal Miller. He was helping build beds, repair the building, organize supplies, and playing with the children. I watched him teach a group of boys how to play baseball. They didn't understand the rules, didn't speak English, but they were laughing. Actually laughing. For the first time since the bomb, some of these children were laughing. Miller saw me watching, waved. I waved back, hesitant. He walked over. You're the nurse, right? From the hospital. I remember you. We saved that little girl together. Sergeant Takahashi translated. Yes, I said. I remember. These kids. Miller looked around at the orphans. They've been through hell, but they're still kids, you know? They still want to play, still want to smile. I don't know. It gives me hope. Hope for what? That this can be fixed. Not forgotten. Never forgotten. But fixed. That someday, these kids will grow up in a world where this never happens again. He was so young. 23. I learned later. Too young to understand that the world doesn't work like that. That humans keep making the same mistakes. That bombs keep falling. But maybe that's what we needed. Someone young enough to still believe in hope. November 1945. Working together. As the weeks passed, the division between Japanese and American staff began to blur. We ate together in the hospital cafeteria. We taught each other medical techniques. We shared stories about our families, our lives before the war. I learned that Lieutenant Wilson had been a school teacher before joining the Army Nurse Corps, that she'd volunteered for Japan because she wanted to help, not because she'd been ordered to. I learned that Captain Thompson had lost a brother at Pearl Harbor, that he'd been angry, wanted revenge, but that anger had transformed into a desire to heal instead of hurt. I learned that Corporal Miller had been a farmer before the war, that he'd never wanted to fight, had been drafted, and now spent his free time building things instead of destroying them. These weren't monsters. They were just people. People who'd been caught in the same war that had caught us. One evening, I was working late when Lieutenant Wilson found me in the supply room. I was crying. Just crying. The grief hit sometimes without warning. What's wrong? She asked gently. My mother's birthday. I managed. She would have been 53 today. Wilson put her arm around me. Didn't say anything. Just held me while I cried. Later, she brought me tea and sat with me until I'd calmed down. I miss my husband most on our anniversary, she said quietly. December 3rd. We would have been married 10 years this year. We sat together in the supply room. Two women from opposite sides of a war, mourning the people we'd lost, finding comfort in each other's company. Do you think we can forgive? I asked. Really forgive? Not just say it, but mean it. Wilson thought for a long time. I don't know, but I think we can try. I think that's all anyone can do. Try. December 1945, Christmas. The Americans wanted to celebrate Christmas at the hospital. Some of the Japanese staff objected. It was a Western holiday, not ours. But others, including me, thought, why not? The patients could use something to celebrate. Something to look forward to. The Americans brought decorations. A small tree. Tinsel. Lights powered by their generators. They brought gifts for the children. Toys, candy, clothes. Simple things, but precious in a city where people had nothing. On Christmas Eve, we held a party in the main ward. American and Japanese staff together. Patients who could walk attended. The children from the orphanage came. Corporal Miller played guitar. Lieutenant Wilson sang. The children laughed and played. For a few hours, the war felt distant. The bomb felt like a bad dream. We were just people. Japanese, American, human. Sharing a moment of peace. I found myself standing next to Captain Thompson, watching the celebration. Thank you, I said in English. I'd been learning the language. Slowly, but enough to have simple conversations. For what? He asked. For coming, for helping, for, I struggled to find the words, for being human. Thompson smiled sadly. That's all any of us can be. I wish we'd remembered that sooner. Before, he gestured vaguely at the destroyed city beyond the hospital walls. Me too. We stood in silence, watching children play with American toys, eating American candy, laughing with American soldiers, watching the future being built on the ashes of the past. My parents would have liked this, I said quietly. They would have liked seeing people from different countries working together, building instead of destroying. Then we'll keep building, Thompson said. For them. For everyone we lost. We'll build something better. January 1946. 6 months after. 6 months after the bomb, Hiroshima was still largely ruins. But there were signs of life. Construction beginning. Temporary housing going up. Markets reopening. Schools starting again. The joint medical ward was a success. More patients were surviving. We'd developed protocols for treating radiation sickness, burn management, infection control. The knowledge gained here was being shared with Nagasaki, with other hospitals, with the world. I'd become the senior Japanese nurse on the American medical team. I trained new Japanese staff on American techniques, translated, served as liaison between the two cultures, and somewhere along the way, I'd stopped hating. Not all at once. Not in a single moment, but gradually, patient by patient, conversation by conversation, the hatred had dissolved, replaced by something I hadn't expected. Friendship. Lieutenant Wilson and I had become close. We worked together, ate together, talked about our lives. She was teaching me English. I was teaching her Japanese. We were planning to write a medical manual together, combining American and Japanese nursing practices. What will you do when we leave? Wilson asked one day. The occupation wouldn't last forever. Eventually, the Americans would go home. Stay here. Keep nursing. Help rebuild. I looked around the ward. This is my home. These are my people. I can't leave them. You could come to America. We need good nurses. You could have a better life. I shook my head. My better life is here. Building something good from something terrible. Honoring my parents by helping others. That's what they would have wanted. Wilson hugged me. You're a good person, Yuki. I'm glad I met you. I'm glad I met you too. Even though I hated you at first. She laughed. I know. I could tell. But you changed. Or maybe I changed. Or maybe we both changed. Maybe we both needed to change. March 1946, 7 months after. In March, a group of atomic bomb survivors formed an organization, the Hibakusha. Survivors dedicated to sharing their stories, warning the world about nuclear weapons, advocating for peace. They asked me to speak at their first gathering, to share my experience as a nurse, as someone who'd seen the immediate aftermath, who'd treated the dying and the dead. I agreed. The gathering was held in a temporary hall near the city center. Hundreds of survivors attended, people with scars, people missing limbs, people who looked normal but carried invisible damage from radiation. I stood before them and told my story. August 6th. The flash, the heat, the death, the patients I couldn't save, the hatred I'd felt, The American soldier who'd changed everything by saving a child. I wanted revenge, I told them. I wanted every American to suffer like we'd suffered. I wanted them to hurt like I hurt. The crowd murmured agreement. They understood. They felt the same. But then I worked with them, and I learned they were human. Not all good. Not all bad. Just human. And humans make terrible mistakes. The bomb was a terrible mistake. But hating everyone who happens to be American, that's also a mistake. Some people nodded. Others looked angry. Change was hard. Forgiveness was hard. I'm not saying forget, I continued. Never forget. What happened here must never happen again. Anywhere. To anyone. But we have a choice. Use our pain to spread more hate, or use it to spread understanding. To make sure no one ever experiences what we experienced. After the gathering, an elderly woman approached me. She had severe burn scars on her face and hands. My daughter died in my arms, she said. She was 6 years old. The Americans killed her. And you're telling me to forgive them? I looked at her scars, her grief, and I understood. Some wounds don't heal. Some losses can't be forgiven. No, I said gently. I'm not telling you to forgive. That's your choice. Your journey. I'm only telling you what I learned. Hatred hurts the hater most of all. I was dying from my hatred. Working with the Americans saved my life, not my body, my soul. She was quiet for a long time. Then, I'll think about it. That was enough. Thinking about it, considering the possibility, that was how change started. August 6th, 1946, 1 year after. On the first anniversary of the bomb, Hiroshima held a memorial ceremony. Thousands gathered at what was left of the Prefectural Industrial Promotion Hall, the building that would later be preserved as the atomic bomb dome. Japanese survivors, American occupation forces, everyone who'd been touched by August 6th. The mayor of Hiroshima spoke. Government officials, survivors, and Captain Thompson, representing the American medical team. I cannot apologize for decisions made by others, Thompson said through translation. I cannot undo what was done. But I can promise this. I will spend the rest of my life working to ensure that what happened here never happens again. That we learn from this tragedy. That humanity chooses better paths. Some people in the crowd shouted. Angry. How dare an American speak at our memorial? How dare they attend when they caused this? But others, including me, understood. Thompson hadn't dropped the bomb. He'd just been trying to clean up the aftermath. Trying to save lives in a city of death. After the ceremony, I visited the ruins of my parents' house. Someone had placed a small shrine there. Not just for my parents, but for all who died in that neighborhood. Flowers, incense, photographs. I added my parents' photo. Lit incense. Prayed. I'm okay, Mother. Father, I whispered. I'm still angry sometimes. Still sad. But I'm okay. I'm helping people. Building something good. I think you'd be proud. A hand touched my shoulder. Lieutenant Wilson. She'd followed me. Can I pay respects? She asked. I nodded. She knelt beside me, bowed her head, prayed silently. Then she placed flowers on the shrine. Thank you, I said. They were your parents. They matter. Just like my Tom matters. Just like everyone we lost matters. She squeezed my hand. That's what we have to remember. That they all mattered. Every single person. Japanese, American, everyone. They all mattered. We knelt together in the ruins, two women from opposite sides of a war, honoring the dead, choosing peace over hatred, choosing to build instead of destroy. October 1946, 14 months after. The American medical mission began scaling down in October. The emergency phase was over. Hiroshima had functional hospitals again. Japanese doctors had learned the American techniques. We could manage on our own. Lieutenant Wilson was being reassigned to Tokyo, eventually back to America. We spent her last evening together walking through the rebuilding city. So much had changed in 14 months. New buildings rising, streets cleared, markets thriving, children playing, life returning. I'm going to miss this, Wilson said. Miss you. Miss the work. You're always welcome back. You'll always have a place here. Will you write to me? Let me know how things are going? Of course, and you have to tell me about your life in America. Your family. We hugged for a long time. Both crying. A year ago, I would have celebrated her departure. Would have been glad to see the Americans leave. Now I was losing a friend. A sister, really. Someone who'd helped me find my way back from hatred. You changed my life, I told her. I was dying inside. You saved me. You saved me too, she replied. I came here angry, broken. Working with you, with these patients, reminded me why I became a nurse. Reminded me that healing is stronger than hurting. December 1946, 16 months after. In December, I received a letter from Kobe, from a Navy hospital. It was about my brother Kenji. He was alive. He'd been serving on a submarine that had been in the Philippine Sea when the war ended. The sub had surrendered to American forces. He'd been a POW for over a year. Now he was being repatriated, coming home. I cried when I read the letter. My brother was alive. After thinking I'd lost everyone, I had family. Someone who remembered our parents. Someone who could share the grief and the memories. He arrived in Hiroshima 2 weeks later. Thin. Tired, but alive. We embraced at the train station, both sobbing, clinging to each other. The last 2 members of our family. I thought you were dead, he said. They told us Hiroshima was destroyed. Everyone dead. Almost everyone, I said. But not quite. Not us. I took him to our parents' shrine. We prayed together, cried together, mourned together. Then I showed him the new Hiroshima, the rebuilding, the hospital where I worked, the orphanage, the schools reopening, the life returning. It's different, he said. But it's still home. Yes, still home. January 1947, 18 months after. My brother got a job in construction. Hiroshima was rebuilding, and they needed workers. He threw himself into the physical labor. I think it helped him process everything he'd been through. The war, the surrender, the year as a POW. We rented a small apartment together near the hospital. Started rebuilding our lives. Our family. One evening, he asked me about the Americans. About working with them. I hated them, he admitted. In the POW camp. They were actually kind. They followed rules, treated us well. It confused me. We'd been told they'd torture us, execute us, but they didn't, and I didn't know how to handle that. I know, I said. I felt the same. When they arrived here, I wanted to hurt them, make them pay, but then I saw them saving children, treating patients, being human, and I realized we're all just humans, all making terrible mistakes and trying to survive them. Do you forgive them? For mother and father? I don't know if forgive is the right word. I understand now that individual soldiers didn't kill our parents. War killed them. Decisions made by politicians and generals. The bomb was a tool. A terrible, evil tool. But tools don't make decisions. People do. So who do we blame? Everyone. No one. I don't know. Maybe blame doesn't matter as much as making sure it never happens again. Kenji thought about that. I can live with that. August 6th, 1947. 2 years after. On the 2nd anniversary, Hiroshima held another memorial. But this one was different. More hopeful. More forward-looking. The city had officially begun planning for reconstruction. Not just rebuilding what was destroyed, but creating something new. Something that would stand as a monument to peace. A city dedicated to ensuring that nuclear weapons were never used again. Hiroshima Peace. Memorial City construction law had been passed. We would be a peace memorial city, a living reminder of what happens when humanity loses its way. I was asked to speak again, this time not just about loss, but about hope. 2 years ago, this city died, I said to the crowd. But cities are made of people. And people are resilient. We survived. We're rebuilding. And we're building something better than before. I gestured around at the construction, the new buildings, the children playing. This is our revenge. Not hatred, not violence, but life. Persistent. Stubborn. Beautiful life. The bomb tried to erase us. We refuse to be erased. That's victory. That's how we honor those we lost. After the ceremony, I visited the hospital. Captain Thompson was gone, back to America. But a new American medical team had arrived, specialists in long-term radiation effects. researchers studying how to help the hibakusha. I introduced myself to the new team leader, Major Roberts. Started the process again, teaching them about our patients, our culture, our needs. Building bridges. One conversation at a time. September 1947. 25 months after. In September, I received a letter from Lieutenant Wilson. She'd returned to Iowa, was teaching nursing at a university. She sent photographs, her with students, in clean classrooms with modern equipment. She also sent something else, a draft of our nursing manual, the one we'd talked about writing, American and Japanese techniques combined, burn treatment, radiation care, trauma response. Will you co-author it with me? She wrote. We can publish it together, help train nurses around the world, make sure what we learned in Hiroshima helps others. I wrote back immediately. Yes, of course yes. The manual would be published in 1949. It would be used in nursing schools across the world. Our collaboration, an American and a Japanese nurse, working together after Hiroshima, became a symbol of reconciliation and shared humanity. December 1947, 28 months after, my brother met a girl, Michiko. She was a survivor like us. She'd lost her family. She was working as a teacher in one of the new schools. They fell in love quickly, the kind of intense love that happens when people who've seen death choose life. They got engaged in December. I was happy for them, happy that life was continuing, that love was possible even after everything. At their engagement party, small, simple, in our apartment, Kenji raised a cup of sake. To the future, he said, to building something better, to honoring those we lost by refusing to let hate win. Everyone drank, agreed, chose hope over despair. That was Hiroshima in 1947. Not forgetting, never forgetting. But choosing to build instead of destroy. Choosing peace over war. Choosing love over hate. August 6, 1950. 5 years after. On the 5th anniversary, Hiroshima had been transformed. New buildings everywhere. The streetcar system running again. Parks, schools. The Peace Memorial Park was under construction. A permanent reminder. A permanent plea for peace. I was now head nurse at the rebuilt Red Cross Hospital. My brother and Michiko had 2 children. Life was full and busy, and sometimes still painful, but good, genuinely good. That morning, I walked to the Peace Memorial Park with my niece, 4 years old, born into a world that was slowly learning from its mistakes. Why is there a memorial? She asked, pointing at the construction. To remember something very sad that happened. So we never let it happen again. What happened? I looked at the atomic bomb dome, preserved in its destroyed state, at the city rebuilt around it, at the children playing in the streets, at the life that had refused to die. People made a terrible mistake. I said carefully. They hurt each other very badly, but then they learned. They decided to be friends instead, to help each other instead of hurting. That's good, she said simply. Yes, it was good. Simple truth from a child who would never know the flash, the fire, the death, who would grow up in a world that, while not perfect, was trying, learning, choosing better. I thought about that American soldier who'd saved a child 2 years ago, about Captain Thompson and Lieutenant Wilson and all the others who'd come to Hiroshima not to conquer, but to heal. I thought about my journey from hatred to understanding, from wanting revenge to wanting peace, and I realized that was the real memorial. Not buildings or monuments, but changed hearts. Minds that learned to see enemies as humans, souls that chose forgiveness over eternal bitterness. August 6th, 1960, 15 years after. 15 years after the bomb, I stood at the Peace Memorial Museum giving a tour to a group of American students, young people from universities across the United States, here to learn, to understand, to bear witness. I told them about August 6th, about the flash, the fire, the death, the horror, but I also told them about August 7th and all the days after, about the American soldiers who helped, the doctors who treated, the nurses who cared, about Lieutenant Wilson and the bridge we built together. I hated you, I told them honestly, all of you, every American. I blamed you for my parents' death. for the destruction of my city, for everything. They looked uncomfortable, as they should. But hatred is a poison, I continued. It was killing me. And then an American soldier saved a Japanese child, and my hatred cracked, and eventually it broke. And I learned that we're all just humans, all capable of terrible things, all capable of wonderful things. The choice is ours. A young woman raised her hand. Do you forgive us? America, I mean, for the bomb. I thought about that question. I'd been asked it hundreds of times over the years. I don't speak for all Hibakusha, I said carefully. Some will never forgive, some can't. That's their right, their truth. But me, I choose to move forward. Not forget, never forget, but move forward. Build instead of destroy, heal instead of hurt. That's my forgiveness. Not absolution, but choice. After the tour, a young man approached me. My grandfather was at Hiroshima, he said, with the occupation forces. He was a medic. He told me stories about a Japanese nurse who helped him learn to treat radiation victims. A nurse who became his friend even though she had every reason to hate him. My heart skipped. What was your grandfather's name? Captain David Thompson. I started crying. The young man looked alarmed, but I was smiling through the tears. Your grandfather saved my life, I told him. Not my body, my soul. Tell him Yuki Tanaka says thank you. Tell him the bridge he helped build is still standing. Tell him his work mattered. I will. Thank you. He started to leave, and then turned back. He wants me to go to medical school. Says the world needs healers more than it needs fighters. I think he's right. He is. The world always needs more healers. August 6th, 2025. 80 years after. I'm 97 years old now. One of the last remaining Hibakusha who was an adult during the bombing. Most of my generation is gone. My brother passed 10 years ago, peaceful and surrounded by family. But I'm still here. Still sharing the story. Still working for peace. The world hasn't learned the lesson as well as we'd hoped. There are still nuclear weapons. Still wars. Still hatred dividing people. But there's also hope. Organizations dedicated to peace. Young people refusing to repeat old mistakes. Former enemies working together. The bridge Lieutenant Wilson and I built has expanded. Become a network of bridges connecting people across the world. Our nursing manual is in its 15th edition. The Peace Memorial Park receives millions of visitors every year. And Hiroshima, my city, my home, stands as proof that from the deepest darkness, light can emerge. That from hatred, love can grow. That from destruction, we can build something beautiful. When people ask me for the lesson of Hiroshima, I tell them this: hate is easy. Revenge is satisfying. But healing, forgiveness, building bridges with former enemies, that's hard. That takes real courage. I hated the Americans who destroyed my city, killed my parents, turned my world to ash. But then, one of them saved a child, and that small act of humanity cracked my hatred like glass. And I learned that we're all capable of being monsters, and we're all capable of being angels. The choice is ours. Every day, every moment, every interaction. Choose healing over hurting. Choose understanding over hatred. Choose to build bridges instead of walls. That's the lesson of Hiroshima. That's what my parents would have wanted. That's what all the dead deserve from those of us who survived. Not revenge, but peace. Persistent, stubborn, beautiful peace. If this story changed how you see war, forgiveness, and humanity, I need you to do something for me. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to this channel because these stories matter. They're not just history, they're lessons we desperately need today. And comment below. Could you forgive? Could you work with the people who destroyed everything you loved? Be honest, because that honesty is where change begins. We can't prevent every war, but we can choose how we respond to it. We can choose healing over hatred, bridge building over revenge, peace over endless cycles of violence. The survivors of Hiroshima chose peace. What will you choose? Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And remember, hatred is easy, forgiveness is hard, but forgiveness is how we survive. See you in the next story.